A very good evening and welcome to a very brand new show on Radio Masti 24/7। जी हाँ बिल्कुल, हमेशा की तरह शाम के 6 बजते ही यहाँ पर रेणुका आपके साथ। और आप जानते हैं कि पिछले कुछ दिनों में हमने एक बहुत ही खास काम किया था and you were a witness to that, and that was the launching of an amazing positive song, and this was for COVID-19 in alliance with the High Commission of India and of course the ICCR. Gana yaad hai aapko? The very amazing energized Gana which comes right here. जी हाँ बिल्कुल सही पहचाना आपने, जो Alvarez, who joined us from India, and this is an amazing song which has been combined and it has been curated and it has been launched in English by Indian artists who have made an amazing name for themselves across the world. And of course, it says, United we fight. We fly so high, we touch the sky, we ask for grace. तो जहां ये गाना बैकग्राउंड में चलता रहेगा, आज आप सोच रहे हैं कि भाई क्या होने वाला है रेणुका, एक नया शो लेके तुम आ गई हो। अब नए शो में कुछ ना कुछ नया तो होने ही वाला है, एंड डेफिनेटली दैट इज एग्जैक्टली व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन टुडे। I'm starting a new series here, and thanks to the amazing person who's going to join me today. Not only is he amazing in terms of the way he speaks and impresses everybody, लेकिन और भी बहुत सारे reasons हैं भाई। knowledgeable हैं, friendly हैं, innovative हैं, he's an amazing great achiever, और of course हमारे उच्चायुक्त हैं। अगर आप सोच रहे हैं कि रेणुका आज इतनी हिंदी क्यों बोल रही है, but I'm talking about the High Commissioner of India to Singapore, Mr. Javed Ashraf. आप जानते हैं कि कुछ ही महीने पहले मेरा एक बहुत ही आई वुड से बहुत ही मेरी पसंद का एक कॉन्वर्सेशन उनके साथ हुआ था, एंड दिस वाज टोटली कैंडिड एंड दिस वाज अ पार्ट ऑफ माय शो कॉल्ड यू इंस्पायर मी। अगर आपने नहीं सुना है वो कॉन्वर्सेशन, देन यू हैव रियली मिस्ड समथिंग. But there is one way that you can still go and listen to it, and that is if you go to our app, the Radio Masti 24/7. वहां पर पॉडकास्ट में सबसे ऊपर आप देखेंगे उनकी फोटो और साथ ही में वो वाला कॉन्वर्सेशन. We talked about where he was born. Of course, he was born in Gaya, the place of Gautam Buddha, as we say. And वहीं से amazing थे, बिल्कुल awesome थे, स्पोर्ट्स में, स्टडीज में, नॉटी थे बचपन में, परफेक्शनिस्ट मदर के साथ में, एंड ऑफ कोर्स हिज फादर अ प्रोफेसर ऑफ अप्लाइड मैथमेटिक्स. हर चीज में सबसे आगे, इसीलिए नॉट सरप्राइज्ड कि सिंगापुर में आते ही उन्होंने किस तरह से बहुत कुछ आगे लेके गए हैं. अब मैं उनके बारे में ऑफ कोर्स आपको बताती रहूंगी while we are here, लेकिन why don't we just invite him? आपको क्या लगता है, लेकर आए मिस्टर जावेद अशरफ को. यहाँ पर देखिए, already people are joining in. Hi Paresh, how are you? A very good evening. And Paresh, yes, I do have your question. मैं definitely उनसे पूछूंगी. इस समय मैं उनको बैकग्राउंड में देख नहीं पा रही हूँ, and I hope कि उनका कैमरा इस टाइम ऑन हो जाए. साइलेंट होकर कहीं से सुन रहे हैं और स्माइल कर रहे हैं बैकग्राउंड में. फिलहाल बहुत बिजी लग रहे हैं. मैं सोच रही हूँ कि इनको कैमरा में लेकर आए सामने कि नहीं. हाय स्वाति एंड वेलकम. मुझे लग रहा है कि शायद पानी पीने की जरूरत पड़ गई है मिस्टर अशरफ को. He knows. Last time he told me कि आप पर मुझे बिल्कुल भरोसा नहीं है, कुछ भी पूछ लेती हैं. तो मैंने कहा ऐसे मत कहो, मेरे लिसनर्स मुझ पे बहुत भरोसा करते हैं, एंड इसीलिए शायद दूसरी बार आने के लिए तैयार हो गए हैं वो यहाँ पर. So ladies and gentlemen, please do welcome with a big round of applause the one and only, of course, the charismatic, I would say, Mr. Javed Ashraf. Sir.
That was way over the top of an introduction. I think much of it is fiction. So, but I tried to shut my ears to but I couldn't. But anyway, good evening to you and to all the listeners. Great pleasure to be back on Radio Masti. Again, a great partner for us and doing wonderful service, not just in keeping people entertained, but also in this time of COVID-19 and the pandemic, been also in the forefront of trying to contribute towards making it easier for all of us, and particularly spreading the message for the workers and for those who have been affected by this pandemic. So thank you for your ever willing readiness to be part of any community exercise.
You have the favor, I wouldn't say a favor, but the words that I said, you have returned with a lot of interest. So thank you very much for that. I'm not amazed at all.
Right. Okay.
मिस्टर अशरफ, कैसा लग रहा है आज? आप सिर्फ हमारे लिसनर्स नहीं, आज आप हमारे ऑडियंस को देख भी रहे हैं. So I hope we've come up to the level. हमें हमेशा से लगता है कि आप विजुअल लोगों को ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस देते आए हैं. आपने हमें बड़ा इग्नोर किया है भाई.
तो आपको इग्नोर ही नहीं कर सकता हूँ, कोई नहीं कर सकता, और रेडियो मस्ती को कैसे कर सकते हैं हम इग्नोर? तो जब भी आपसे हम लोगों ने अक्सर इस पिछले 3 सालों में वी हैव बीन speaking to each other. You have been a great partner for us in every event that we have done. Through you, we have reached out to a very large audience, not just here in Singapore, but beyond the shores of Singapore. So we greatly value Radio Masti. That I can tell you.
Thank you very much. You see, we have a lot of people who have actually taken out time from their very busy schedules. And of course, they've been excited about having you here on the show with us. And I'm sure you can read those messages as well that are coming and flashing on the screen as we speak. And here we have somebody who has just moved back to Singapore from China. And they are right now currently in quarantine. And of course, they're talking about the amazing, amazing help from the Singapore government. And at the same time, the way they came to Singapore also from India at one point of time, and these are Indians by nationals. So, wow, amazing to have you here. And of course, Vande Bharat mission already mentioned ho chuka hai. I wanted to take that a little later, but sabse pehle I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Let's just अभी क्या है ये bosses वाला नाम जो है ना हमारे शो का, so people are thinking बहुत serious बातें होने वाली है, so I have to bring you to a certain point.
I'm sure people know the bosses are the least serious people because everyone else does the work for them. So yeah, I mean that's the one myth that we have to get rid of.
Yeah, really? So are we saying the corner office is actually a joke? Not really.
Not a joke, but it's light.
That's true. Yeah, especially with such confident people at the helm. अब तो आज तो मतलब it's going to be like a mutual admiration club. So Mr. Ashraf, I was thinking कि COVID-19 में a lot of us obviously have changed our lives, and there has been an impact personally and professionally.
Right.
So how would you say that this situation has impacted you on a personal level and also on a professional level?
Oh, well, I think it has touched all of us. There's no question about that. I mean, and I guess many of us here have been far luckier than others. There are people who have experienced loss of dear ones, loved ones in isolation. They have not even been able to attend funeral or say a final goodbye. There are those who have lost jobs, those who have been uncertain about their livelihoods in the future, have had to scrounge for meals. We've heard and we've seen many tragic stories over here as well of people who have suffered bereavement if their families lost a father or a mother or a sibling in India and haven't been able to visit them. There are people who have been, for example, women in the 35th week of pregnancy, uncertain whether they can travel back home for delivery, because there is a certain time limit beyond which they cannot travel. We've had a situation of a young lady who was suffering from terminal cancer, and she was really on the last few days of her life, and her last wish was to be able to go back to Trichy and breathe her last in the lap of her mother. And that was something we were able to organize. In fact, having to offload 3 passengers to allow her and her family members to get home. So I think when we look at all of that, when we look at the challenges the frontline workers face, those who are in service industry, those who are spending their days reaching out to those who need them the most, and we've been very, very comfortable, all of us, particularly here in Singapore. We have to say that despite every challenge that we've faced, it's been a much better situation than in most parts of the world. So I think for us here in Singapore and for us here in the mission, the last 3 months have been really spent working each day of the week, around the clock, in looking after the Indians who are stranded here, those who have lost their jobs, those who are in students who want to get back home. So they and they've been we're talking really about 10 to 12,000 people. Then we have the situation of workers. 35% of all workers infected, migrant workers infected with COVID in Singapore, are in fact Indians. So it's been a big challenge. We've been here in office 7 days a week with a skeletal staff because we also observe the same circuit breaker restrictions that Singapore has for others. This has been, and for me personally, this has also meant that my departure for Paris got postponed by at least 2 months, if not longer. And but at the end of it, one can argue that it's been both for us being in Singapore much safer and more comfortable. That we all have to agree, thanks to the way the Singapore government has handled not just the pandemic but the supply lines, etc. So there'll be no shortages here. But also, it's been a great opportunity to be able to provide some degree of comfort, succor, and service to the Indian community over here, and particularly those who were stranded away from home. And we were often also helpless in the sense that we want to get everybody home as quickly as possible, but there are constraints that we work under as well. Yeah.
क्या बात है question एकदम से side पर करके you left the personal side aside, you just came totally to the profession.
I told you my personal side. I said I was to be in Paris on my next assignment, and I'm here.
No.
Beyond that, as I told you, there hasn't been any difference. We've come to office at the same time, 9 a.m., and then leave very late. And then once we get home, then we have dinner, and then we are back to phone calls, sometimes to the airport to see off repatriation flights. The only thing is that we've been, not going out for dinners or for meeting people. But that's about the only change that I've seen over the 3 months.
Okay.
Certainly not nothing else really in terms of
Right. So I was going to talk about your move from wo I need to Yatem in just a little bit, but I thought that will be the last one before we move on. Yes,
right.
Singapore.
No, we come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. I'm sure you're looking forward to Paris, but yeah, we're going to hold you back for as long as possible. Vande Bharat mission. Yeah, so obviously it is what is top of mind at the moment for all the Indian nationals. Stranded across the globe. And I have to say that apart from your tweets, which have been keeping us updated about last week being Chennai, Coimbatore, Delhi, Amritsar, Madurai, Mumbai, wow, there's been like a total flight of flights. And of course, that involves a lot of stuff. It involves international level coordination between governments. Of course, there's internal coordination between center, state, ministries, ticketing, data collection, whatnot, right? So I can imagine when you say 7 days a week and it's been work. But some people do feel that there's a certain criteria for selection of the travelers. So I have a question here from Paresh, who's been stuck in Singapore. And I have to bring it up to you because, he's been trying hard and he's left his job. He wants to go back to his mother who needs him. And he left his job way back in March. And he was hoping that 1st of May, he will be flying back to Ahmedabad. And then the flights got cancelled and things happened. So he's been asking a question as to how do you select the travelers? And what can he do to make sure that he's chosen on the next flight to Ahmedabad, for example?
Well, I'm sure he's going to be on the next flight, which is on the 24th to Ahmedabad. And I think it would be good if he were to send us his registration number.
Right.
And we'll try. You see, every person now, let me say this. Today, we have so far managed to repatriate 5,751 people on our flights. In addition to that, about 304 have gone on chartered flights. So you're really talking about a total of 6,054. So 6,000 people on 34 flights in the course of May and in June. So we have still got a few flights left in June.
Right.
We still have about 7,000 people to repatriate. Now, when we started this exercise of collecting data on those who wanted to go back, it was 1,500. That was at the middle of April.
Right.
Today, if the numbers keep growing by 400 to 500 every day. Now, the criteria was very clear. We were looking at those who elderly, um, the sick, pregnant women, medical cases, bereavement in family in India, workers who got laid off and have nothing, no means to survive over here, employment pass holders and their dependents who are here, people who came here for a 5-day visit for maybe a month, or maybe even just a 5-day visit. There were people who were here for business for 3 days and they were stuck here. It's a lot. So it's for us. Every case is a compelling case. I can assure you that there is absolutely, from our point of view, everyone who wants to go back should be on the first flight out. But then we have to make some choices. And sometimes those choices are painful and hard. We've had sometimes to deal with a situation where somebody's come to us and said, my mother passed away, and we don't even have a flight for the next 10 days. How do you deal with that situation? Remember also that there were restrictions. First, you have a limit on the number of flights. Remember, Singapore is just one of the cities. We had to repatriate about 300,000, 350,000 people from all over the world. You can imagine what the situation is in the Gulf region, where we have 8 million people living in 6 Gulf states.
Yeah.
So, and so many people have lost their jobs in there, and the situation isn't as comfortable as it is over here. We've had, yes, students also who wanted to go back. Students some who were minors, who were studying in school over here, left alone because the schools had closed. But we've had, for example, limited number of flights going to some places. For the first few weeks, we had no flights to Tamil Nadu, and it was very painful dealing with that situation. Why did that happen? It happened because the central government not only has to look at its own capacity to fly people back, but it also has to see the capacity of each state to be able to take in returning Indians, quarantine them, test them, etc. And you can imagine that some of those states that are particularly gateways into India, Tamil Nadu, Mumbai, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Delhi are the leading states in terms of COVID positive cases in India.
That's
So,
right.
so they have to take care of their own, to those who are resident there, and then take care of those who are returning. So that had to be staggered because it was in the interest of those who are living in those states, but those who are also returning, that there was some kind of a management process. So this is why we've had to deal with long gaps sometimes. And then there was a phase when Maharashtra said we're simply not in a position to receive anyone because of the massive increase in cases. And it takes a lot of constant pressure on our part, constantly going back to Delhi and saying, look, there are people who are desperate to get back. It is not easy to get up every morning and feel that sense of anxiety and uncertainty that when will I ever go back? If people know that we've got a flight coming in 10 days, they're at least reassured. So we try to accommodate, and I must say that some people are very persistent, and they are able to hammer their way in because and sometimes it's kind of, but we really go by some really compelling cases. And Paresh, I have to tell you, if you just send us your and maybe ask Renuka to send us your registration number, and we'll definitely try to put you on the flight to Mumbai, which goes on the 24th. Because we don't have any direct flight to Ahmedabad at the moment.
Yeah. Perfect. So I think there's a reason why I brought this up, Mr. Ashraf. And a lot of people cannot see through all the work that is happening behind the doors. I think what they see is that I have written, no one's answering the call, no one's answering to me, no one's responding to my emails, and that's where people start believing.
Yeah. So let me stop you there because, frankly, you have to understand that we have been saddled with very limited staff also.
Yep.
But we've set up 3 numbers for just this purpose, hotlines where people are taking calls, and we test that. Sometimes what happens, they're so inundated with calls that it's the people back up in the queue and then they give up, right? we try to tell our people that, okay, try and call them back if you can. But I mean, I get a rate of, we've set up three email specially for this purpose. In addition to that, I get about 100 emails in a couple of hours through the day. So if I find it sometimes very forbidding to just open my email because it's just like a flood that comes in. We actually try to respond to as many as we can. I mean, this is something, some will get standard responses because they are standard emails. So we say, look, we've registered you, we've acknowledged you, but some we actually say, call us back or give us your number, we'll call you back. A lady writes and says, I'm 35th week of pregnancy, I just need to go back. Or if somebody says, my father died. We make calls to people. We make calls to people when they are, please go to the airport. Now there is a flight. So we have, and in addition to that, there are people who keep constantly writing to us on Twitter. Now, I understand that that those who are doing nothing and very anxious, obviously very nervous about what their prospects are about returning, will do this and will write to us, will keep repeating their messages to us.
Yes.
But when everybody does that, then it becomes even more difficult for us to respond to everyone. But I want to assure your readers, there is no one who is not important. And we actually, this afternoon, I was scanning the list for Bangalore and Kochi. We went through a whole list of, because we have a registration portal. And when we get the data, we download it every day and we see, and we actually try to say, no, this person really looks like a compelling cases, and we need to provide that to a person. But I have to say that while we would like to answer every tweet, and there are thousands of people who tweet, we like to answer every email. We like to be able to respond to every call.
Right.
Sometimes it's physically impossible to do that. And sometimes I think that, I've seen today somebody write to us 4 times.
Oh,
or tweet 4 times. That doesn't necessarily help anyone's case, but it might actually lead to a kind of a jamming up of the system. If 50 people write 4 times, that's 200 emails. And so I'd like to assure people that, look, we are interested in getting you back home because it makes it easier for us as well. Also because from a human perspective, we really recognize how difficult it is. But all we can do is to keep pressing Air India, our Ministry of Civil Aviation, and the state governments that, for heaven's sake, try and open up and let people in. Because of our constant intervention and intercession, we are now going to get more private carriers coming in as well, because they've now agreed to also be part of the repatriation. So that might ease the bottleneck and the pressure on Air India. And we hope that we can therefore accelerate the process of repatriation. And we expect more flights coming in July as well.
Lovely. So I think that's there. And I am also guilty to some extent because people have seen you and me talk a few times and they start believing that I have this special connect through which I am able to get their work done.
No, that I'm sure you have a special connect, but we try to be fair to everyone, and I can assure you that it is not a question of saying, okay, somebody knows someone and all. This is something that I personally do not encourage or support. That someone has access. Of course, there will be people who will have my numbers, who will reach out to me, and they'll be familiar to me. But the merits of the case remain very important for us. True. Merits is what we will go by. We had, for example, 77 priests who had come here for a function in a temple. And we got calls from, they were stranded here, and we got calls from all kinds of people, very high up here also. But we tried to not sort of say, okay, these are the people who are the most compelling cases, because they were being well looked after over here. But there were others who needed to be home, perhaps more quickly. Yeah. So I'd say that, but I'm glad that you are raising those issues, and I see this not simply as an exercise you're doing because you're running a radio program, but because of your broader sense of using this medium to help and support the community. and therefore we value this conversation a lot, and I'm quite open to answering any other questions on this issue.
Great. So it's but I didn't intend to bother you at all with these questions.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I lost you there. Your voice got garbled.
There is a little echo at your end. I wonder why it
No,
keeps.
there's no echo now. Unless you
No,
want me to
okay.
mute me. Should I
No,
mute
no,
myself?
not at all. I don't want you to mute you. I mean, people are going to mute me then. So
Yeah.
I said it's corner office, but I didn't mean to corner you with these questions. All right. So just moving on, we're talking about repatriating Indian nationals from across the globe to India under the Vande Bharat mission. But there's also the OCIs and the poor people who are, sort of not able to go back to meet their parents. And so obviously there's a huge lot of people wondering when are things going to get better.
Yeah.
And with
So
brand India,
gradually, now,
yes,
let me complete the question and the answer. You're talking about OCIs and foreigners. Now
yes,
we've started permitting OCIs to go back, and many have. More than 100 have, and we've now also started permitting foreigners in certain categories. So we haven't started. Naturally, no country has started regular international travel for foreigners. I mean, even in Singapore, there are still very wide restrictions. And in any case, who would want to travel and go through 14 days of quarantine, come back and go through another 14 days of quarantine? But for foreigners who have compelling reasons, and there are many, those who have jobs in India, for example, those who are residents in India, those who might be minors and have parents living in India. I mean, there are many categories of foreigners who do not yet have an OCI, but we have permitted them to go. But those who have OCIs are now obviously being permitted to go back into.
right. So and as you,
And I'll tell you the guidelines. I just read something on the ticker on a
yep.
question. No, the guidelines are very clear. I think we've put out all the guidelines on the website of criteria. We've put out processes.
Yeah.
We've even for those who want to charter a plane to go, we have very detailed guidelines of how this will work. Guidelines have two things, right? Guidelines means conditions of eligibility and the process through which you get the approval. Both are very clearly laid out on our website, and for those who, I mean, all it takes is for you to go to our website. There are two links. One is for Indian nationals, and the other is for OCI/foreigners. You click on it, you fill in your data, you get your registration number by email, and I mean, if you feel like you really have an urgent need to travel, you can just write. We put out the email addresses also on that. You can write to us saying, "This is my registration number. I'm really in desperate need to go back, and can I be accommodated?" Of course, if 1,000 people write and a desperate need to go back for a flight that has 177 seats, we obviously will be able to have to disappoint 823 people then, right?
Well said. Absolutely. And I
So
trust your judgment and your decision criteria completely. The guidelines are laid out clearly, and it's a case to case basis. So there is no one
yeah,
size fits
yeah.
all in this case, which we totally appreciate. And then I think people just think about Indian nationals overseas or the OCIs going back, but there's also things like, the crew change, for example, that the High Commission of India was involved in recently, which happened in Singapore to keep the global shipping trade moving and all that.
Right.
These are invisible to the audience, right?
Yes, that's very interesting because you see, one of the things that people forgot when they were talking about global supply chains being intact
Yes.
is that who runs these global supply chains? The ships, and the shippers who are, but no port wanted to allow them to disembark from the ships and come on board because of the experience. So there was a real serious situation, serious problems on ships everywhere. There were crew that was on ship for 2 months, 3 months. They were literally mutinous. We used to have, shippers complain about, they need to change. Then you need to get off and you need to have fresh crew. It's like airlines. Pilot flies for 8 hours, then he needs to change.
Yep.
So eventually it dawned on people that we have to work out a system whereby there can be crew changes. That means that those who have been on ship for 100 days, 50 days, 60 days, they are able to disembark and a fresh set of crew goes onto the ship. And so this process involved some thinking, and we've been able to do that. We were able to get an aircraft that had replacement crew come in from India. And on that aircraft, we had crew that had been on the ship for a long time go back to India. And that meant synchronizing it. I mean, MPA, the Maritime Port Authority, said, look, the ship, the gap between the ship coming and the crew disembarking and the taking off shouldn't be more than 3 to 4 hours. Which means that from the ship, they had to go straight to Changi and go straight into the aircraft. So we had to synchronize many things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I would tell you that during this period, while we were also looking at repatriation, the mission has also spent first month, in fact, we continue to do so, really trying to take care of those who were stranded here. We had, we were providing accommodation, we were providing food, sometimes even for students, dry ration, because many of them were living together and they wanted to cook. So we had made arrangements with shops in Little India to provide dry ration. We had made arrangements with 10 Indian restaurants to provide food to those who had appealed to us for food. So they would get Indian food. Some of them were delivered. There were also charitable organizations, including Perumal Temple, the Hindu Endowments Board, which worked with us, the Chulia Mosque, which worked with us, Gurudwaras that worked with us. So, I mean, the compassion and humanity that came to the fore supplement us. We've also, when students were there, I mean, very few people would understand how deeply we went into it. We appointed 2 professional counselors to speak to students who were feeling a sense of, they were 17, 18, they were feeling a sense of anxiety, isolation, bordering sometimes on depression. They couldn't even go out. They couldn't interact with their friends. They weren't sure. And their parents were calling them from India, beta, come back home, etc. So we even went to that level. We had people here who were stranded. They brought their medicines. Elderly people had brought their medicines for just a few weeks or maybe days. Then they suddenly ran out of their medicines, maybe for diabetes, for blood pressure, for various other ailments. So we tried to make arrangements. In one case, we got a consignment from India. In another case, we worked with doctors here to provide prescriptions. There are all kinds of things we had to intervene, but we tried to see how much we could help within the limitations of our resources and our guidelines from government. But I think to a large number of them, we were able to provide some degree of comfort. So yes, there's so many different things that we experienced during this period.
Right. So completely times and obviously reacting within this span of time without delaying things and helping and coming forward to support the Indians, any part of the world. I think the High Commissions have done a commendable job. So initially, I think when people start thinking that, the High Commission is not reacting, what they're not understanding is that there are certain processes that have to be established. It's not just that you start reacting. You have to think of end to end and how to tie the ends which are spread across the world. So I think that's hats off to you. And exactly as Parasu says, hats off to all the efforts from High Commission of India. So yeah, and at the same time, I think what I do want to move a little bit away from the Vande Bharat, which is an amazing initiative and been carried out very well and appreciated across the globe. There is the brand India that people are talking about now, right? So we're talking about economic impact of the pandemic on India. We're talking about this being largely disruptive. And it's not just India, but because of the numbers, as you rightly mentioned, coming from Maharashtra, coming from Delhi, these are numbers which are not very they're not comforting numbers. So the impact on the growth, the unemployment, the supply chain, funding for startups, there are organizations that are suspending operations. There's a lot happening in India right now. How would you think that, in your view, COVID-19 is impacting brand India as such?
Well, first of all, it's left no one untouched in this world. There's no country across the world, the strongest of powers, the countries we had were inspirations for the rest of the world, from in the West in particular. They all suffered a grievous wound, as it were, not just in terms of a health crisis, but also in terms of its social and economic consequences have been very, very stark.
Yes.
I think it's really impossible at this stage for anyone to calculate the economic toll that this would extract from all of us, because we are just seeing what is happening at this point of time, which is in terms of immediate disruption of economic activities and the resulting unemployment, uncertainties, shrinking demands, etc. Many businesses and many sectors actually will suffer a mortal blow from COVID-19. But down the line, as you look at maybe even a second wave of the pandemic, maybe also next year, when the debt that is piling up is now called in, what happens to the state of affairs? It means everything. It means at the level of the macroeconomy, at the level of the country, we have poor countries that are saddled with debt which they may not be in a position to repay. Then there are corporates which have borrowed and may find themselves unable to repay the loans. They will go under. What happens to the banks and the financial institutions that own those debts? Because ultimately it's the finance which greases the wheels of the economy. And we will then end up in a circular causal. So if banks don't have money, they can't lend to new businesses, then it creates all kinds of problems. So it is, you can look at it that way, but you can also see what others say, oh, there'll be a massive surge in demand, and we'll have a V-shaped or a U-shaped recovery. Some say W-shaped recovery. But I think it is good to hope for that, but prepare for the worst. As far as India is concerned, I think we have had our fair share of challenges, as people have seen. It's affected, as everywhere else in the world, it affects the poorest the most when the economy stalls or when it ceases. It's those who are the poorest are the hardest hit everywhere. And this is what we have also experienced in India. But we also have a number of strengths. Of course, the one side of it is that we are taking a number of measures to inject liquidity into the economy, taken a number of measures to provide immediate relief to workers, to farmers, to those who are poor. And we've taken a number of measures for the medium and small scale and micro enterprises. That there are 60 million units of what we call the MSME sector. They're the backbone of employment and in the country. We've investing a lot more now in the immediate last couple of months in social and health infrastructure, and also provided a degree of tax relief, tax measures that should help people a long way. But we've also have launched a series of, use this crisis as an opportunity to launch a series of structural reforms cutting across all sectors of the economy, from agriculture to mining, to manufacturing, to infrastructure, to the financial sector. In every area now, we've announced a series of bold reforms. Those reforms will hopefully unleash the animal spirits in the economy. We have been careful about not being too profligate, not being excessive in terms of our fiscal spending, so that we don't run up such a huge deficit that leads to excessive borrowings by the government and crowding out of private investment, and to higher rates of inflation and to a stress on the currency. So there are macroeconomic issues to look at and then work through that. But so it's a combination of immediate relief, liquidity injection of about 110 billion by Reserve Bank of India, some tax measures, and some structural reform measures that will, I'm confident, take us into better stages in the months and the years ahead. But equally important, I'd say, is that this is a period, you mentioned startups. We're also seeing some extraordinary examples of startups and innovation and technology being used during this period. One of the very interesting things that I read is that in the first 3 months, the amount of funds raised by the fintech companies in India was 40% higher than in the previous year. And it was much higher than what was raised in China during that period. See, we've used technology, direct benefit transfer used through Aadhaar and the Jan Dhan Yojana. We were able in the first 3 weeks to transfer $5 billion worth of cash to 160 million beneficiaries. We have used now technology for remote learning, learning Diksha, and is a great program which has had 610 million hits in 2 months. Arogya Setu is being used effectively, which is an app for contact tracing. We have been able to leverage technology to ramp up our Ayushman Bharat, which is the health insurance scheme. We are going to create now a new system that migrant workers, we realized all of them had their ration card, that that food, through which they get subsidized food, grains through the public distribution system, but they are migrants, so they can't. So normally in the past it used to be address specific, so you live in a particular village, you belong to a particular village, that's where you get it. But now we're in the process of making it portable. So the portability of welfare benefits, which means you can carry your ration card anywhere in India and get your subsidized food from the public distribution system. Incidentally, we are going to cover 640 million people by the end of August under that scheme. So this is also an opportunity for us to ramp up the digitalization process. Reserve Bank of India has made a number of new measures to encourage and incentivize use of digital payments, remote banking, digital banking. And we are also in the process of launching new schemes for e-trading in agriculture products. So the farmers can now, doesn't have to go to a government designated mandi and sell his produce there. He can sell it on the market to anyone. So that's going to change many things, even in the rural sector, and certainly help them increase their income levels. So yes, I mean, this is a challenging time. Like everyone else, we will suffer an economic slowdown or contraction. There will be unemployment for a period of time, but I think this is also a moment of opportunity for us to rejig the economy and also inject some sort of energy into it and restore the momentum. We have all the fundamentals are strong. We have the demography, the scale. We have a lot of enterprise and innovation in our youth, in our country, and this will see us through.
Going by the way the challenges are seen across in China and the US, what would you say would be India's stand in terms of Make in India, for example, for the US? Is that something which
Well,
we...
Make in India is a top priority for us since Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi came to office in 2014. That's been one of the signature schemes that we've launched. We see new opportunities in Make in India. Not just, and I'll tell you, it has also now become a kind of a mission, because we have also seen that we are vulnerable in many respects, sometimes in some of the most essential and vital supplies. So that one aspect of this is that we do want to be able to have a degree of self-reliance, which is what Prime Minister Modi also spoke about. Now, self-reliance does not mean being self-contained and closing our doors and closing our windows. It just means being self-sustaining and self-generating, that we have the capacity to be able to engage the world with a much stronger industrial base to take care of our fundamental and essential needs. This is what every country is going to do. That's one side of it. The other is that we think there will be some shifts in global supply chains. Those will arise not just out of the concentration risk that people perceive now, but also because of geopolitical changes that are taking place in the world. The escalating trade tech frictions, the technological decoupling that might happen. There's so many other factors, changing relative cost structures. So there is a great opportunity for India. And I know that many surveys have showed that a lot of multinational companies, a lot of other companies see India as a priority when they think of a restructured supply chain. That doesn't mean that supply chain will shift out of A country and go into B country. It just means that people will build resilience, redundancy into their supply chains. They will also work in a way where they may shorten the supply chains, and nearshoring is also going to happen. So there are going to be complex changes that will take place. We see an opportunity therein. A lot of companies are already speaking to us about investing in India. and because it combines now an enormous and stable market together with the opportunities to export to the other world, rest of the world.
Lovely. And I think that's the opportunity that we're looking amongst the pandemic and amongst the other challenges, which not
Yeah.
only India but the rest of the world is also facing. And I think it's only right for every country to be protecting its own citizens above anybody else, which
Mm.
is the call of the hour. So just moving a little bit closer to home, I know you're looking at your watch. I caught you doing that.
I am, and I was trying to look at a message which just keep coming, and I think it's again somebody sort of sending me a message saying, I need to travel.
You should route the person to the Radio Masti page right now so that we
Right.
can take.
I'm just going to say that if you want to get a seat, speak to Radio Masti. Right.
All right. See, I didn't tell you that to be
Ah,
getting this in the same hour.
right. Okay.
So, just coming back a little closer to home, so we see
Yeah.
that the India and Singapore relationship has obviously been evolving in the current scenario as well, right? The COVID-19 test kits and, of course, other essential supplies. So, just a quick one when you answer to that person, if you could also answer to us about what's going on closer to home.
Oh no, it's okay. So this is again. I've just said okay. As a standard reply. Okay. Yeah, I'll get back to them later. Yeah.
Right.
No, India, Singapore, of course, have an excellent relationship. I mean, there's no question about it. We and it's a relationship that goes beyond just the metrics of trade data, investment data, tourism.
Hmm.
It is that indescribable chemistry, trust, mutual confidence, and goodwill that exists between governments and between the people of the two countries.
Hmm.
We have similar values. We have a connected history. We see the familiarity and comfort of a shared cultural heritage. We have similar worldview in terms of how we want to see the region as secure, stable, and prosperous. We have and we have, of course, extraordinary pool of talent in both countries to drive this relationship forward. And we are blessed also with the power of innovation among our youth. We have a very broad relationship. It covers everything. We have some. It is very few people sometimes realize that for both of us, our defense partnership is among the strongest that we have with any country for each other. India does things with Singapore we don't do with any other country. Similarly, India is Singapore is the largest investor in India, and likewise, Singapore is the largest destination of Indian investments, and through here into ASEAN region. Uh, we and during this period too, I mean, I can describe to you all that we are doing, but that's not the purpose of this session, and we could do another session on that separately. But during COVID period, we've tried to keep the supply lines open. First of all, I would say at the very outset, as I have conveyed to the leadership here, to Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, to senior ministers, that India is extremely grateful to Singapore for the way they have looked after the Indians over here, the manner in which they have cared for the Indian workers living in dormitories and outside dormitories. I think it's a marvelous example of compassion, kindness, also of reflecting values. They have treated them as they would treat Singaporeans in this time, whether it is in terms of treating the sick, isolating those who are healthy, looking out, ensuring their salaries, their food, medical help, but also dealing with psychological and social implications. For example, providing free Wi-Fi and free SIM cards to workers and enabling them access to entertainment channels that enables them to at least feel better, not just be sitting in their room and wondering what they're doing here. So that's again something which I wanted to convey, and I think all of us here who live here, Indians, must appreciate this gesture.
Yeah, we
Second,
absolutely. In fact, they even have collaborated with us for special
yes,
entertainment and engagement programs for the migrant workers.
I'm sure they must have loved Radio Masti and you must have brought a lot of cheer to them. I'm not sure. And then
Goes without saying, Mr. Ashraf, everybody loves us. It's just you who didn't give us all the importance these past few years.
the Then we
I
have
managed to distract you a little bit. I'm so glad because you
no,
were going too serious. So this was deliberate.
no, that's all right. No, I think, and we've tried to keep this up. They came to us and said when India went into a lockdown. This is a very interesting anecdote. When India went into a lockdown, we they came to us and said, you know, we're not getting rice from India. The 30% of rice consumed in Singapore apparently comes from India, and so a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables. And to many palates, this was like taking away their basics. So we
Oh,
work very hard to get at least those supply lines from fruits and vegetables, rice moving, medical supplies from India to Singapore. As Singapore has also helped us with testing kits and with reagents that are used in tests. So we've had a conversation between our two prime ministers. We've had conversations between our foreign ministers, and we have reaffirmed during this period the that we will try and continue to build further and intensify our cooperation. So the important thing during this period for us was that we get Singapore's cooperation, whether it came to helping Indians who were stranded here extend their stay legally, which they were very supportive of. They were very helpful with us on the repatriation flights, and we
right.
have mounted so far. And without the support of Changi and the government, it wouldn't have been as smooth a process as it has been. Similarly, we've helped the repatriation of Singaporeans and permanent residents from there to here, also now enabling the return of those who are getting permission of MOM. And through this period, I've only seen one thing, which is that we have a constant desire to be supportive and helpful to each other. They have been very generous with their time. I mean, I've had the opportunity during this period also to engage with the leadership. This is not something that comes easily during this time. And similarly, on our side, we made sure that, whether it came to masks, whether it came to raw material to make masks, sanitizers, medicines, that we were forthcoming, despite our own needs and despite the ban that was there in exports from India, to be able to supply these items to Singapore. So our relationship is going to get stronger as we come out of it. We both recognize the need to strengthen supply chains. We both recognize the need to keep our economies open, to keep the trade going, to maintain peace and security, and to strengthen multilateralism, whether it is in WHO, whether it is in WTO, whether it is in the UN. And we were very supportive of Singapore's candidature for the direct post of Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization. This is the first time a Singaporean is the head of a UN body through an election process. India was very early in conveying its commitment to support Singapore's candidature. So again, I mean, we think there is, in fact, a lot more to do as the world comes out of this crisis, because as you would have all seen, it is not necessarily going to be a more cooperative or a kinder world. It might actually be a more contested, more conflicted world than what we saw a few years ago.
For
So
sure.
it's in the stormy waters for friends like India and Singapore to work together.
Totally. And a lot of credit to, of course, it's a part of the legacy that you are leaving behind, Mr.
Yeah.
Ashraf. I will bring you back to some lighter conversation before the end of the hour and you escape, because this might be one of the last few interactions that we're
Right.
having.
No, I'm always game. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to Radio Masti.
So I just want to go back to the introduction that I had made for you, and you
Mm.
were obviously listening to me with your cameras off. Uh, so I had mentioned that, of course, you've been stated to be one of the gems of Indian Foreign Service, knowledgeable and friendly, and an excellent speaker, and innovative, and a great achiever. And of course, you've been amazing for Singapore. At the same time, we all are pretty much aware of your love for Nepal and for Kathmandu, right? So I'm just going to ask you something and see your reaction to that. That what do you
Yeah.
have to say to your the person you are replacing in France? He moves to Kathmandu, and
He has moved to Kathmandu. I can just say best of him. It's a best of luck to him. It's a very critical and a sensitive relationship, very important for us, and he's Can't think of a better person to be in that job. So I wish him all the best. There are always going to be some challenges in a relationship that is so close as we have with Nepal. But I'd also tell him to enjoy the. He's already been there once before. In fact, when I was serving there, so I'd tell him to go out trek in the majestic Himalayan range and enjoy a city like Kathmandu, which is truly beautiful. It's got many layers woven into it. It's got great culture. It is a great bridge between India and Tibetan culture. So it's something which it's in many ways a place that you keep discovering and enjoying as you live there.
Yeah.
Lovely nature all around you. Very few cities you can sit and sip coffee in winter and watch the sunset on 200 kilometers of Himalayan range. It's not easy to find such places and at a very close range. Sorry?
Doesn't I said you're going to do that at the top of the Eiffel doesn't make it any lesser.
Well, watching is a very different thing now. So I think, yeah, he's going to have a great time.
So another thing that I obviously wanted to talk to you about is a question which is a little bit of a trick question. Yeah. So everybody's been asking you, amazing. Now there he goes. His antennas are all high. What I want to actually ask you is that everybody's been saying things like, "What are you going to miss about Singapore?" And that's the easier, question to answer. But what are you not going to miss about Singapore? Got
What am
you.
I not going to miss about Singapore? Radio must be no.
I will follow you wherever you are. You can't hide from
No,
well tried.
there's very little to. I mean, see, the only thing perhaps I could say is that it's a small country in size, and you pretty much see everything in a very short period of time. And so the only way you can actually escape is to go to another country. For us, it means getting permission from Delhi, Ministry of External Affairs, and informing Singapore government that I'm leaving station. I mean, that becomes a bit of a pain. So I've barely gone out of Singapore, and but I mean, I think it is always hard to leave the city, leave this country, and as I told you before, that it isn't just this infrastructure or its living conditions, its safety, its business environment, the buzz, the great food, opportunities and options at all their price points. It isn't just all that, but there is much more to Singapore in terms of its heritage, in terms of the way it has woven its diversity. It is its multiculturalism, its multiracial society, nurtured it into a vibrant cultural heritage. And it is in some ways a great example and inspiration. As I've told you before, that I've spent a lot of time diving into the community, to grassroots, to joining many celebrations of all kinds of festivals, and being with people in different environment outside my normal diplomatic life, and that has been a great learning experience to see how Singapore works on day-to-day basis to build a truly harmonious society, and a wonderful fabric from the diverse strands that it has imbibed through its multi-layered history and made it so.
Yeah. People are appreciating the questions, but what we have not heard is the podcast that we have where we've talked about the invisible grooming school that, of course, trains you to be in the civil services. And of course, you were the topper there. So how can you not answer the way you normally would be expected to, right? So let me ask you another question before I let you go. I know you've been looking at your watch again and again.
Yeah, somebody's waiting to meet here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's an old one, Mr. Ashraf. Please try something.
I've actually got to go. Somebody's coming home, and you said half an hour, so I said, okay, 7 o'clock. I'll see you at home. So.
One more question. I know people want you, but just one more question, which is going to be: is there anything that you've left incomplete And in Singapore, something that you wished you had time for before you move on.
Oh my God, there is
Ah,
so much that I would
कुछ
at
काम
both.
नहीं किया क्या? ऐसे कैसे बोल सकते हो आप?
No, both personal and professional. Personal, I mean, there's still like, wish I had done more walks in the nature park. I have. I mean, there's a fabulous nature parks. I wish I had done more photography, which I love doing, or street photography in particular. I wish I had I had experimented more in terms of food. I did, but I clearly think you can spend a lifetime in Singapore and not do enough of it.
True.
Um, so yeah, I think in some sense, I wish I had a more work-life balance, as they say, because I think I spend my weekends at work as well, either in office or in
We all
functions.
know.
So, and professionally, I think there is just so much we can do together. And one area where we've been working with much passion, with much energy, is the area of fintech and innovation. And I think there are many initiatives we've started, many we've achieved, but some that I hope will get completed in due course. Would have liked to see that done. And one thing I would, of course, regret is that we were going to lay the foundation stone for our new embassy building in
Oh,
April, which must be postponed for another time now. We are going to build a really spanking new embassy building on Stevens Road, where we have a large plot of land for a long time. And it'll have everything, and that'll be really a qualitatively different environment. We'll have an auditorium with 700 seats, with reception area for thousands,
wow.
massive car parks and exhibition halls, conference rooms and things. So it'll be a great addition to a city and to a country that is really one of the top relationship, and where we have probably my mind, the best diaspora you can find.
Whoa, you that. And is that for all the Indians listening to you right now and for the nice words that you're leaving behind? Come on, let's hear that one more time.
What? The best
Yes.
diaspora? Yes, it is the most talented. I've said that publicly on stage. Yeah.
Have
In
you? Okay. Why don't I
Yes.
hear? I just thought this time it should be for the diaspora.
Good. So yeah, so I think that's so I think there's a lot that we can still do here. I'd like to see more done in terms of trade and things, because we have a great opportunity which is fully not fully tapped. Like to see more cities in India connected to Singapore by flight. We have 16, which I think is probably more than most Indian cities are connected to each other.
Right.
But nevertheless, it could always do with more. I think there are a great opportunity for trade, for commerce, and for tourism and cultural relations, people-to-people ties when cities are connected by air directly. So there are so many things. But it's always a work in process. And I'm sure when you pass the baton on to your successor, that they will carry this forward. But I always say, let me say this in conclusion, that it isn't the High Commission that does it. It isn't the two governments that are doing it. It's the collective effort of everyone, every stakeholder in this, and the community, the business, the entrepreneurs, the civil society, the civil servants, diplomats. But so we're just some ways catalyst, some ways just a participant in this process.
Lovely. Very put across. I'm unable to get more messages here, but there's Sukanya who's saying all the best to you. There's Abdul who's saying, can we catch you over a coffee in Paris if you visit in the coming years? There's, of course, Manisha saying, we miss you. And are you going to miss Singapore, or have you already fallen in love with Paris?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to fall out of love with Singapore.
Well, I could have only expected the best from the best, and you never go wrong with your words, Mr. Ashraf. Thank you so much for joining us, and I know we have kept somebody waiting, but well, nobody wants to let you go. And with this, we also want to wish you the best for your next assignment. We know you are anyway going to flourish and do the best, better than before, because you have always believed in you being your own competition, as we talked about last time, and you said you always want to be better than yourself. So yeah, we are sure of
Not
that.
better than myself, just try to have a sense of integrity and try to achieve a sense of perfection in what you're doing. So never set yourself up for competition with yourself or with anybody else. No.
Whoa, golden words. Thank you so much, Ms. Ashraf, for being with us today and being with us in Singapore, and of course, being just who you have been the last few years to the Indian diaspora and
Right.
also for the relationships. I think it's always been a pleasure interacting with you. So I know you're going to miss me and miss us. You can say nice words before you leave.
Yes, you stole my words. So, now if I say it, it sounds repetitive and prompted. So let
I
me.
want to make sure you don't forget.
No, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. For me, the joy of being in Singapore has been, of course, the warmth of the people and to learn so much from each of them because I think it's such a reservoir of great talent. You represent as a shining example of that, of enterprise and talent. And you've done wonderfully, I think, in the course of taking Radio Mastri in some very challenging times and not a very easy environment to where it is, to a very passionate set of loyal listeners. We will obviously always remain in touch. Wish you the best, and I hope that you will continue to have a global footprint for Radio Masti out of Singapore. That'll be another great export from Singapore to the world.
Oh, wow.
Um, so thank you, and to your listeners once again, wish you all the best in the days ahead through these trying times, but to more wonderful times ahead. And to all of you who wish to reach me in Paris, it's always going to be easy to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
where we can find it. But thank you so much. Thank you
You're
for this,
welcome. Right.
and
Thank
all the
you.
best to you. And say hi to Paris. And it's what I need to je t'aime, as I said.
All right. We will do something which will be Singapore, France, and India together.
Awesome.
Okay.
With that, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
joining.
Right, thank you. Enjoyed it. And thank you once again. All the
Thank
best to you too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was the first episode, and of course, an amazing one as that, as expected. And in conversation with the bosses, this is the corner office, and of course, that was the High Commissioner of India to Singapore, Mr. Javed Ashraf. As you all heard, he is going to be leaving for his next amazing position, that is going to be in France. But before that, he's really done wonders for Singapore, as we know. And once more, I want to remind you that you should go and tune in to the podcast on our Radio Masti 24/7 app, where he's been more light in his conversation, because that was exactly what was expected from that conversation. If you want to know about his background, you want to know about how he was in his childhood, you want to know about how he came up and chose civil services as a career, and of course, how he went to the IIM Ahmedabad and decided that corporate is not for him, but he wants to draw on a canvas which is available in the civil services. But all of that and a lot more candid, you can definitely listen to that on our podcast on the app. But before I go this evening, let me also tell you that next week we'll have another episode of Corner Office, and we do intend to feature certain amazing individuals from the community. We do have the Global Indians Foundation chairman, Mr. Atul Timurnikar, joining us at some point of time, and also the head of DBS, that is Mr. Piyush Gupta, also coming in, and of course the head of Tata's, Mr. KV Rao, also joining us in the episodes that follow from now. Until we meet again, this is Renuka signing off from Radio Masti 24/7. I know that there was a little bit of a challenge here in flashing your messages towards the end, but definitely your messages shall remain on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel for everybody to see and enjoy, and of course for Mr. Ashraf to go through later and also answer maybe personally. Till then, take lots of care. As I always say, stay positive, don't test positive. That's exactly how you need to be. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow on yet another episode of another show. Be good, अपना ध्यान रखिए, and tune into Radio Masti 24/7 wherever you are. Love you all.